Hi, my name is Justin. Today we're going to be talking about masks. What are they? How do you use them? Let's jump right into it. This can be a very advanced technique when editing.
Are you sure about that?
Masks allow you to isolate a certain area of your footage where you can then alter what is included or excluded in the mask. These adjustments that you could make could include increased or decreased exposure, blurring, coloring, or more traditionally, you could use the mask to remove parts of your footage. One way to think about it is when you're painting a wall, and you would use masking tape to isolate the certain areas that you don't want to get paint on. In a sense, it's kind of like that, same deal. Editing technology today allows masks to be created with ease by clicking a mouse and making your shape. But masks have been used for decades, so how did they do it without computers? The perfect example to look at would be George Méliès' The Mysterious Portrait, which came out in 1899.
Wow!
For those who may not know, George was the Zach King of his time. He always had editing tricks up his sleeve and was even referred to as the father of special effects. In the minute-long film, George himself enters onto an empty stage, walks around a bit to ensure that everything is normal like a magician, then he selects the background for his frame, places a chair in front of it, and with the wave of his hands, his living double appears in the frame. George and the portrait exchange some laughs, maybe a little conversation, and then with a flick of his wrist, George casts away the magic portrait and it goes back to being the original empty frame. So, how did he do it? This was captured using real, physical film. So when editing, they took every individual frame from when the painting came alive and used a small blade to cut out a box right around the frame. At this point, it just looked like a black box because there was nothing in it yet, there was nothing behind it. Next, they cut out a separate shot that they had filmed of George posing in the chair, acting as if he was talking to himself, and glued those individual frames into the empty box. When you were watching the film, you might have noticed the shaky edges of the portrait shot. That was because it was very difficult to match the exact cut from before, as it was done by hand. Nowadays, we don't have to worry as much about things like this because the programs that we use make it super easy and very, very nice to try to do those effects. The biggest thing to consider when making masks is to plan in advance. Think about how you want your desired effect to look, so that way when you set up the camera, elements like the framing or lighting will look good when you're editing. A classic effect I've seen used a lot is the cloning effect, where basically you set up your camera on a tripod or somewhere stable where it wouldn't move. Then you would go onto one side and do an action like reading a book. Then you would walk onto the other side, do another action, and then basically what you would do is, in your editing timeline, you would overlap those two different clips, and then you would basically, like scissors on paper that's right on top of each other. You want to see the one below, you just make a little hole on the one on top, so that way you can see the one in the back. So you make an invisible little cut in the middle of the frame, and maybe you could feather it, which is basically blending the two, and it looks seamless. The tricky thing about doing something like this is the lighting, because if you were to do this near a window, like maybe it's a sunny day and it keeps kind of getting lighter and darker, that could affect one of those two shots, and then one side could look darker than the other, revealing your little hidden mask. I messed around with masks for a long time and they don't always look pretty. A perfect example of not looking pretty is in a video I released a few years ago called Teleportation Experiment. There were many things wrong with the video, but I like to think that there were some things done effectively too. Actually, maybe not. Most of the shots only used cuts to mimic the effect of disappearing and reappearing, but there was one where my brother and I were in the same shot and I fired an arrow at him and then he poofed away after I supposedly hit him. So this was done by taking two shots and making a mask around him so he could disappear and not get hit with the arrow at the same time. If you look closely, you can notice where the cut is made from the masked B shot to the primary A shot. Right where I pick up the camera from the tripod is where I attempted to make my hidden cut. It was a very sunny day, which made it very difficult to hide. And to the one comment that realized I hadn't actually invented teleportation, you got some pretty keen eyes. I'm proud of you. If, for example, you want to have an actor in a completely new environment, you would have to mask them out entirely to make it look like what's behind them is a completely new location. You could use your pen tool or some other means of masking to create a shape around your actor or actress and then go frame by frame adjusting your mask, which is called rotoscoping. Or you could do what most sane people do and just use a green screen. In some cases, there might be a light or something in the frame of the green screen shot, but this does not ruin your shot necessarily. Not everything that you want to remove needs to have a blue or green screen. All you have to do is make a mask around your subject and then key it to get the same effect. The main focus of green screens is the edges of your character, because it's so tricky, and that's usually the biggest giveaway that you're using a green or blue screen. If an actor is moving quickly in front of a green screen, you can kind of see the blur because it can't cut around your hands as it blurs. That's when the background is kind of revealed with it. In the case of a Hollywood production, they would do things much differently, where they might have to communicate with the visual effects department to make sure it looks a certain way, or use references before making masks to make sure the lighting looks good with or without the green screens. It's a whole nother ball game, something completely different. So that's masking in a nutshell. Hope you found this video helpful, and next episode we're going to be going over rotoscoping. Alright, peace!